Welcome to yet another episode of Curiosities Unlocked. I cannot believe that it is already November. Today we will be discussing a topic that has always sparked my curiosity, and that is cults. And so we will be talking about cults around the world. Yes, not just in the US, but around the world. But did you know that there are over 10,000 cults in the USA alone? Yes, alone. And the definition of a cult is pretty much a group of people with an extreme dedication to a leader or to a cause, a set of beliefs. They are often viewed as odd by others. But that could be anybody. Everything is viewed as odd, right? Someone who collects Barbie dolls. Like, you may not be able to understand, why is this grown woman collecting Barbie dolls? Or it's an excessive admiration for someone or a thing. Like Barbie dolls, right? Or something that is popular amongst a certain segment of society. Like, one of the myths about cults is that they're always religious. That's not true. Also, another myth about cults is that they're dangerous. That's not true either. Like I said, someone can have an obsession with Barbie dolls and it be considered a cult. But what makes a cult dangerous? We are going to get into a few stories and you will start to gather why that is. Coming in at number 5, we have the Rajinicis, the mystic, also known as Osho. Cults are attractive because they create the illusion of comfort, belonging. In the 1970s, Indian mystic Bhagwan Sri Rajinicis, also known as Osho, he gained quite a following for rejecting the institution of marriage and embracing sexual liberation and free love. After experiencing some trouble in India, Rajinicis moved to Oregon and started a compound. Rajinicis had big goals, believing his principles would eventually dominate Western civilization. His message inspired many to trade in their high-paying jobs, normal lives, and worldly possessions to live in a compound. With tie-dyed robes, they changed their names and became more disciplined, or as they call themselves, Rajinicis. Everything seemed to be going well until the sex-positive tried infiltrating the local government, and some Rajinicis attempted to sway election results in a bioterror attack, putting salmonella cultures in local restaurants and poisoning hundreds of locals. After that, Rajinicis was deported and died soon after, in around about 1990. However, this non-religious sect did not die with its leaders. There are still Rajinicis all over the world today. As I stated, it's weird because sometimes a cult always starts off as something good, something inclusive, but then sometimes in certain situations they always turn to something that they wasn't originally. Next up at number 4, we have Angel's Landing with Daniel Perez. Cults satisfy the human desire to have absolute answers, to have this knowing that other people don't know, to be enlightened in ways that other people aren't enlightened. In the early 2000s, Lou Castro, aka Daniel Perez, convinced his followers that he was an angel that had the power to heal and could see into the future. Perez and his followers lived on a 20-acre property referred to as Angel's Landing. In 2003, a member of the cult, 26-year-old Patricia Hughes, was said to have slipped into the swimming pool in Angel's Landing and died. However, law enforcement who had already been keeping a watchful eye on the group was skeptical that Hughes' death was an accident. A few years later, Patricia's husband also mysteriously died, raising even more red flags for local detectives. One of the detectives, Goodwin, unearthed a pattern of expensive life insurance policies and deaths of those close to Perez happening about every 2 years. However, the detective did not have any substantial proof and could not make any arrests. Authorities later found out that Perez had been raping one of the youngest members of the group, named Sarah McGrath, for years before Sarah's mother also mysteriously died. Thankfully, Sarah's boyfriend realized something was off with her family and contacted the FBI. Soon after the FBI got involved, Perez was arrested and charged with 28 felonies. Later convicted and sentenced to 80 years in prison. Goodwin, a detective that I mentioned earlier, remarked that Perez's conviction was, and I quote, "probably the most amazing feeling in my law enforcement career." Wow, that is deep. A lot of these stories I had not heard of prior to me doing the research for this, but that particular story I think I saw on maybe a television special or something like that. It sounds so eerily familiar. Next at number 3, we have, Next at number 3, we have the nation of Nuombian. Next at number 3, we have the United Nuombian Nation of Moors. Next up at number 3, we have the United Nuombian. Wow, that is deep. A lot of these stories I had not heard of prior to me doing the research for this, but that particular story I think I saw on maybe a television special or something like that. It sounds so eerily familiar. At number 3, we have the United Nuombian Nation of Moors. Those with low self-esteem are more likely to be persuaded by cult environments. Not saying that everyone would be persuaded, but there are some who have low self-esteem that want a sense of belonging. This cult's core beliefs are difficult to specify because Nuombian mythology has shifted so much over the years, between belief in UFOs, Atlantis, to incorporating stories from the Bible, New Age, other religious texts, worshiping pyramids in Egypt, and believing in black supremacy. One common belief among the members of this group is that white people have lighter skin because of leprosy and having sex with animals. The United Nuombian Nation of Moors was founded by Dwight York. However, the name of the cult has changed almost as frequently as the group's beliefs. York began the group after getting out of prison, and it slowly started expanding, and he managed to convince his followers he was a god of sorts and controlled almost every aspect of their lives. His followers were required to give up their possessions, live in barracks, and had to earn a certain amount of money each day. And if they didn't, they were beaten. Being a leader, York was able to have sex with any woman in his cult following, even sexually abusing and raping underage members. After different run-ins with the law, York was eventually sentenced to 135 years in prison for racketeering and crimes related to underage members of his cult. The group is still around today, even though their leader is behind bars. Many members are still active online and believe that York's arrest was unjustified and the government framed him. The whole 100 and something years remind me of so many cults that are getting charged recently for racketeering. We have the 𝐡𝐚𝐯𝐞𝐜 cult. We have the 𝐡𝐚𝐯𝐞𝐜 cult, where the leader, Keith Raniere, was charged with over 100 years. We have R. Kelly, who was also found guilty of racketeering in his case. And even though I don't know if they kind of deemed him as a cult, I look at some of the behaviors that he displayed as very cultish. And I'm sure once people start analyzing it over the years, they will also agree with that. And although R. Kelly has not been sentenced, I'm sure that he will get something up in the hundreds also. In at number 2, we have the House of Prayer. Did you know that women are most likely to become involved in cults than men? Did that surprise you? It really did not surprise me. Anna Young, or Mother Anna, founded the House of Prayer in the 1980s as a place for people to get a fresh start, become financially stable, and find salvation. However, as the group began to grow, Mother Anna became somewhat of an idol to her followers, and the power eventually began to corrupt her otherwise good intentions. Her beliefs apparently were biblically based. However, Young interpreted and twisted Jesus' teachings, torturing her followers for their sins by starving, caging, whipping, and abusing them. Young was even charged with manslaughter after the death of 2-year-old 𝐡𝐞𝐞 Jackson. According to reports, the child died after suffering a seizure. Young believed her to be possessed and forced her to run in circles by beating her if she tried to stop, while other members were chanting in a circle around her. Wait, I can't believe that this happened to a 2-year-old. Wow. Young was later charged with child abuse and evaded capture until her daughter turned her in almost 10 years later. Once new revelations came to light, she was charged with second-degree murder and negligent manslaughter. And sentenced to 30 years. She died 42 days into her sentence at the age of 79. I believe in this particular case that there was another kid that she had abused and murdered, but they hid it. If you will see the pictures of this house, it's astonishing. It's sad. When these cases involve children, it makes it so much harder to tell and to understand the people who are involved that would do this to kids. But there are so many of these cults, and even though this was a religious one, there are so many of these cults that kind of do some really terrible things. They do some really terrible things to kids. Last up and final. This is only final because this is part 1 of this cult series. I will be coming back with part 2. Next up and last for today, we have Order of the Solar Temple. Cults maintain their power by promoting this us versus them mentality. We saw this a lot with the whole QAnon thing, is us versus them. This cult was founded in Switzerland in the 80s and began growing in popularity in the 90s. Members of the order's belief system is mixed between Christianity and Freemasonry, believing that the end is nigh. And they are meant to help guide humanity through the second coming of Christ. Members of this cult also believe that after the impending apocalypse, only the devout members, and this is the members who have paid a hefty fee while here on earth, will be sent to another planet to enjoy their afterlife. After some suspicions begin to arise regarding certain aspects of the cult, some members begin to defect and leave. So the leaders, 𝐷𝐸𝐸 and 𝐥𝐢𝐻𝐿, hopefully I pronounced their names right, did their best to convince the remaining members that they needed to go to the planet early and get a jump start on their afterlife. AKA, they had to kill themselves. 74 people died in total, and the members who refused to participate in the mass suicide were murdered, strangled with plastic bags, or shot in the head. The Order of Solar Temple still has hundreds of followers to this day, presumably waiting for the world to end so that they can join their leaders on the planet which orbits Sirius. I just want to say, whoa. Whoa. It's nice to have some type of beliefs in other things, or that, you know, there's an afterlife and that we'll be on another planet or we'll be in heaven with God and all of these things. It's nice to have some type of belief so you feel like you have something to look forward to. But, whoa, that was a bit deep. It reminded me of Jonestown, where they drink the Kool-Aid. Or some people call it not the Kool-Aid, but they did drink the Kool-Aid. And so it reminds me of that, because some of them in that cult was forced to drink or were injected. And so it's really sad. But if you ever feel like you have a family member or if you feel like you may be part of a cult, I will put some resources below in the description so that you can see and you can start to be enlightened and have the knowledge of what you need to do, and maybe some steps that you can take to remove yourself from those situations. But as I stated before, this is part 1. We will be coming back with part 2 next week. I thank you for watching, and I will see you for the next episode of Curiosity Unlocked. Please like, subscribe, and comment below. And thank you.